Hello, welcome to your video on systems of linear and quadratic equations. You'll be able to solve these systems using both a linear and quadratic equation. So what does solving these types of systems look like? There's a picture here for you. You can see what two solutions would look like. The linear line passes through 2 points on the parabola. One solution, the linear line passes through just 1 point, which would have to be the vertex. And then no solutions are if the linear line does not cross through at all. How do I solve via graphing? There's 3 different ways you can solve these types of problems, which you probably remember, which are substitution, elimination, and graphing, and that's what we're going to talk about. But here, when you're just given your 2 equations, what you're going to do is graph them, and we'll start with the linear line first. So let's make an XY table, and you just pick whatever points you want. So if x is 0, that would be 2. If x was 1, that'd be -1 plus 2, which would be 1. If it was 5, it'd be -5 plus 2, which would be -3. And you just pick points to graph. You might also remember that this point here, this number here tells you your slope, and this tells you your y-intercept, and that would also help you. You could plot your points that way. Then we have our next one, our parabola. So this would be, you could use the opposite b over 2a to find your vertex. So in this case, it would be, 1 over, and then 2 times 1 is just 2. So my x-coordinate would be 1/2, and then I can plug that in to my xy table and figure out what the y term would be. So here we go. X is 1/2. Oops. Y, then when I plug this in, I would get 1/2 squared, which is 1/4, minus 1/2 minus 2. And that will give me an answer of -2 and 1/4, which means my vertex is going to be kind of hard to plot here, but it'll be something like that. And then you can also just pick other numbers that are a little bit nicer to work with. But here, let's pick 1. Yeah, let's pick 2. So 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. And then 2 minus 2 is 0. So now we have our next point at 2, 0 here. And notice that point does cross. And let's pick another point, let's say -1. And that will evaluate. So -1 squared is 1 minus -1 minus 2. And that will give you an answer of 0 as well. And now we can actually keep going here because we need to find where it also crosses, and we know it crosses here, but we have to find that other point, so you just got to keep plotting points. In this case, we're going to do -2 next, and it's just kind of just trying. So -2 squared is 4. 4 minus -2 would equal 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. So -2, 4 is going to be right here, and that's actually where it crosses. And so here is my parabola. So then the solutions here would be at this point and this point. So the solutions would be, let me write in something a little bit easier to see. The solutions then would be -2, 4 and 2, 0. I will let you read through this problem because we want to keep moving along. How do I solve via elimination? Remember, elimination is the method when you take and cancel out a variable. I'm going to rewrite these a little bit so that things line up a little bit better. And then you'll want to cancel. And in this case, we're going to want to cancel our y just because it's easiest. Not that you can't cancel something else. But if we subtract here, that cancels out our y's. We're left with 0 right away. And then you're just going to subtract everything. And you're left with this equation. And then you're just going to factor from there. So the first thing we want to do is factor out that negative sign, just because you don't want to deal with it. It makes things more complicated. So factor out that negative right away so that we can work with a positive situation. So plus 60. Now that I have this, I can factor, and I can take x times what. And this is, what's going to be a product of 60 and a sum of negative 19? Well, that would be negative 4 and negative 15. So then x equals 4, or x equals 15 are our final answers here. So then you have to go back and solve for y. And this gets, there's a little extra step here because you have to use either x. You can't just use one. So I'm going to go back and use y equals 20x, and x is going to be 4 in this case, plus 124. So y equals 204. Or your other option is y equals 20 and x is 15 plus 124. And then in this case, y equals 424. So the pools had the same attendance on days 4 and 15, because that's what your x represented. And then on day 4, each pool had 204. And on day 15, there was 424 people, and those would be your two options. How do you solve via substitution? Remember, substitution is when you replace something to get in for another. And so in this one, we're going to replace what y stands for in for y. So I'm going to just take this piece and drag and drop it in for y. So we have 4 minus x equals x squared minus 6x plus 10. And then we're just going to subtract so that we get 0 on one side. And it doesn't really matter which way you go, but I just look for the easiest method. So I'm going to add x on both sides, and then I'm left with 4 equals x squared minus 5x plus 10. And then I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides. That will get me 0 equals x squared minus 5x plus 6. Now that I have it set equal to 0, I can factor. So 0 equals, and then what number can I get a product of 6 and a sum of negative 5? And that would be negative 2 and negative 3, which means x could be 2 or x could be 3, either one. And then we have to go and plug that in for y. So we're not done quite yet. So now you'll take your equation. I'm just going to take y equals 4 minus x. So 4 minus 2. So y would be 2. Or you're going to take your y equals 4 minus 3. And then y would be 1. So your answers then would be 2, 2, or 3, 1. It is your turn to solve via substitution and by graphing. We will talk about the graphing one in class, but you can go ahead and do both of them, and I will give you the answer to substitution when you are done. So go ahead and pause. All right, negative 6, negative 42. Or 714 for number 1. And I actually decided to write down the answers for number 2, but hopefully you can see if you got that right based on looking at your graph. This is the last page of your video. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.